Welcome to the second video on this series for projects on coding and an introduction to programming in general. So in this video, we're going to be building a basic program. And this basic program is essentially going to be a coin flip program in where we flip a coin 10 times. And this is not an actual coin because it's programming. It's a digital coin, of course. And this digital coin is going to use a random number generator to flip, to determine a random number each time. And based on that random number, we're going to be incrementing a variable that is representative of the counter of a certain result, so heads or tails in this case. Now, just to keep in mind, this is one project. There's going to be several other projects that we're going to be doing, and this is a relatively easy project, and we're going to keep going higher and higher with more and more difficult projects in the future. And the languages will switch between Java and Python. In this case, we're doing Python. So let's get started. So as I explained earlier, we need a coin and we're going to flip it 10 times. So first things first, we need to import our statements because that needs to go first in our program. And the import in this case is going to be the random library in Python because we need to randomly generate numbers for our coin flip. So I'm just going to type out import.
And as you can recall from the last video, we had the collaboration feature on this replit, which allowed users to share their programs with other users. So in this case, Pranav shared his replit with me. So now I have edit access, and now we can work together on projects. So in this case, we're working on this program together.
Exactly. As you can see here, this is the button that we had, and this was mentioned in the previous video, so you can go view that one for more details, but it's just basically inviting with emails and it's not too hard. Okay, so yeah, that shouldn't be too bad. Now what we'll do is we will go ahead and create variables. Now, creating variables is important, but you don't have to get it right the first time. If you get it right the first time, that's probably because you were lucky or because you have a lot of planning. Um, but the whole point is to make mistakes and then fix those mistakes because that's when learning happens and that's also when you make a more efficient program. So in this case, I know that I need at least one variable, and that variable that I'm going to need is is the variable that determines the number of heads or tails. So let's just call that variable C, right? C for counter, or you can type out counter if you want to, but typically I just like to use C, simple and nice. And I'm just going to initialize this variable to 0 because currently we have 0 heads or 0 tails, whatever. And we're going to be using heads in this example as the desired outcome.
And also, if you see this import random, you can refer to my Python in video where you can import libraries. And basically what these libraries give is like we have more features that we can use in this program. So the reason why we're using random is that recall how you can flip a coin is that you can get heads or tails. And we can make random to use in order to generate a random, you can make it random so that you get heads, or you can also make a random where you can get tails as a desired outcome. And also, the way we declare variables, as you can recall from the MyPython videos, you have the variable and you have one equation signs, which means that whatever is declared on the right side of the equation is going to be stored in this variable. So in this case, we're just initializing it to 0 from the start.
Yep. All right. So the next thing that I wanted to do, or we want to do to build the program, is we need to actually set the variable that's going to store the output from the random generator. We'll call that variable, say, for example, um, storage or something like that. It can be called anything, doesn't really matter. When I don't know what to call it, I'll just call it X because that's what I'm used to calling it. But you can just call this output, for example. Output is a better name. And so output is going to be set equal to what? It's going to be set equal to a number, right? Because it's going to be set equal to the random output. Now, how do you actually get the random output? You need to use the random library now. That's why I imported in earlier in the video. You need to actually go random dot and then rand int, and then inside here you need to specify the range. Now, as you can see here, we're actually asked to fix our code. We have an error because, or we would have an error if we run our code, because I capitalized the I, and it's telling me right here that I have to, the actual method that we're using is to not specify the I. So if I click on this, it's going to fix for me, but make sure that you know the method beforehand so you don't get errors. But even if you do get errors, fix them later on. Inside
Uh,
here, we
and
need to specify the range.
And also, basically, the methods that are part of the library are case sensitive, which means that they treat uppercase and lowercase differently. So we need to make sure that we have the right capitalization for a method. And also, we had this random library. And the reason why we have this dot, as you recall from my Python videos, is that we can have this library and this dot in order to gain access to this method of rand int in order to generate a random integer.
Yes. Another thing you could have done in order to import this is you could have actually set up an import statement up here and where you import the randint method specifically. And so you don't need to actually do this random dot every single time.
The way we do this is that we have from random and random being the name of the library. And after we had that library, we can do import rand int being the name of the method. So we have from and we have random being the name of the library and import the specific method that we want to use in our program. And but if we have like a huge list of methods that we want to use, we can just simply import the whole library. But this can be useful if we have like one or two methods that we want to use to our program. And how this makes it easier is that we don't need this random anymore. We can just simply use rand int instead of needing to use the library dot.
Yep, that's exactly right. And say, for example, I'm using the rand int a lot of times, but I'm not using any other method from the random library. Then all you need to do, well, in that case, then I don't need. It would be a hassle for me to do random dot rand int every single time. So it's just better for me to just do rand int. So instead, I could just use this statement here. And in this video and in this program, we're not going to be using any other method or anything else from the random library. So we can just do this and be done with actually typing random dot. So the next thing I wanted to say is, as you can see here, Replit actually tells me that inside here, I need to specify the range. So the range can be, it can be any size. In this case, I'm just going to do two numbers. It can be 0 or 1, right? That's the flip. You can do 1 or 2, 2 or 3, 100 or 101, anything, but 0 and 1 are nice and easy. So I'm just going to do 0 and 1. The thing that you need to realize is that this range is inclusive. So 0 and 0, so the output can be 0 or 1. Um, if I did, for example, 0 to 4, that would be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So 5 total possible outputs. So it's inclusive. We call that inclusive when the boundaries are included. Exclusive would be, or non-inclusive would be when you don't have the boundaries included. So it would be just the internals. And in that case, if you use bracket notation, you would have, so this would be non-inclusive, like 4 to 5. And inclusive would be something like you have the square brackets and it would be 4 to 5, including the 4 and 5. This is just the bracket notation here. But anyway, here you're just only looking at 0 and 1.
So now that we've declared that variable with output that's going to generate either 0 or 1, now what we need to do is that we need a while loop. And recall from my conditions and loops video in Python, a while loop is basically like you can set a limited iteration and set a limited limit for that iteration and set a termination for that limit. So the way that this is going to work is that we have while, and then the statement that we need here is a termination condition, which means that what until we set the ending for like how many times this certain variable should iterate. So in this case, we'll have while n is greater than or equal to 9. Since in this case of this program, we're going to be generating 10 random flips. And we're going to need to start at 0, and we're going to do it less than or equal to 9, which means that it's going to include this 9, and we're going to be doing it 10 times. And we need to make sure that we end our while loops with the colon, because that's how it's going to work in Python. And when we give a new line, it's going to automatically set the indentation for us. And what this indentation means that is that whatever is in this indentation is going to be part of this while loop. But if it's not in the indentation, then it's not going to be part of this while loop. And well, in this while loop, we can iterate the count of n plus equals one. And what this also means is n equals n plus one, which means that each time we're going to be generating a random coin, we're also going to be making sure to iterate the count by one until it reaches nine, which means you'll have 10 random flips in total.
Yep. So those are two ways to write this statement here. Now, as Arnesh mentioned earlier, the thing with Python is it's all based on formatting. So if you format your while loop in the way like this is this. So actually close that. This n plus equals one is inside the while n is less than or equal to n is less than or equal to nine statement. So it's inside of the while loop. But if I go outside the indentation like this, I'm outside the while loop now, so I can type anything. So say for example, print something, right? Print hello. Um, Here this would actually be outside the while loop, so it wouldn't print hello 10 times. It would based on the iterations, it would actually um, print it after it's run. Another thing I wanted to point out is notice that n is not even initialized yet. We don't have n. N does not exist, right? Here it says while n is less than or equal to n is less than or equal to 9. What is n? We don't know because n is what's the value for n? Is n less than or equal to 9? I don't know because it's not even there yet. So we have to actually create it. So let's go ahead and create it right here and set n equal to some number. In this case, it's just going to be equal to 0 because we want to iterate it 10 times. And so if you go ahead and count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it's 10 total times. So that's essentially what you want to do.
Yeah, so now that we have this while loop set up with the variable and we have a count for how many times we want to generate random heads or tails for coins, now all we need to do is just randomly flip 10 times. So all we need to do is just copy and paste this output variable here. And so it's going to give us either 0 or 1. So now that we have defined this variable to randomly generate 0 or 1, now we can we can iterate a count for, in this case, we're going to be counting the number of heads that are randomly generated. So we can have if output. So in this case, the output being the 10 random generated numbers or which are 0 and 1. So for example, if output equals 0, then we need to make sure that we iterate the count by 1.
Yes. So uh, that's the thing. If you wanted to set 0, so in this case, hypothetically, right, we're flipping a coin, and in this case, we're setting 0 to be heads and 1 to be tails. You can choose not to put it that way, and you can set 0 to be tails. It doesn't matter, but be consistent. So just make sure that you know which one's heads and which one's tails if you're like building a game or something. So just keep that in mind. Now, another thing I wanted to point out is notice that here output is set equal to something, and then here output is set equal to something again. You actually don't need this line at all because output is just going to, even if we create our output and initialize it with a variable or with the value here, that's fine because we're going to set it with a value, and then it's going to keep changing each time our while loop runs, or it's going to stay the same depending upon the random output. So we don't even need to initialize it because it's initialized over there, and that's going to work out for us. And each time it's going to produce a value, and then based on that value, it's going to increment the C accordingly. So we don't need this line at all. Uh, Finally, we can notice that our program just quickly trace through your code to make sure that you have everything and everything is good with no errors. So C equals 0, N equals 0, N is less than, while N is less than or equal to 9, output equals rand int. So that's going to get you the output value. And if it's equal to 0, we're going to add 1. And then we have to, outside the if statement, notice that the if statement ends here. If I wanted to add something inside the if statement, I could just go ahead and press enter, and it's indented so you can see it. The indentation matters a lot. That's the whole basis. So you have to make sure that it's right. And then n is plus equals 1. That's inside the while loop, but outside the if condition that is inside the while loop. So just kind of make sure that you get that one. Finally, what we can do is we can set up our print statement.
And so now what we're going to do is basically print out the number of heads that were randomly generated. So in this while loop, we were able to calculate the number of heads that were randomly generated through this iteration by 1 of C. So now what we're going to do is simply just print out number of heads we got. So all we need to do is have print and open and close parentheses C. But
Yes.
we'll try to expand on this by saying, you see, as you see in this terminal, you have $2, and what this two is basically means is that we have gotten two random heads. So in order to do this, recall from my Python videos, you can concatenate strings, which means join strings together. And in order to do this, you can do set up a string in a quotation marks, and then you can do you have. In order to follow the formatting of this, you have dollars. And in order to concatenate strings, recall, is that you have this quotation mark and you have this variable. Now, all you need to do is to concatenate these strings is you have plus and the variable name.
Yes. One thing you need to do though, and this is important with Python, is if you go ahead and run the code, let's just run the code, see what happens, okay? Notice that you get an error. What is this error saying? We can read through the error, and sometimes the errors are going to make sense. So reading through them should be your number one thing that you do if you see an error. It says type error can only concatenate str, not int to str, which means that you can only concatenate str to str. You can only concatenate strings to strings. You cannot concatenate strings to integers. That's the thing with Python. With Java, however, you could actually go ahead and do hello world plus C, which would just actually combine everything and print it out. But here you can't combine these two different data type values. So you have to make sure that you convert this integer into a string, and it's not that hard. All you need to do is just use str and
And
then
you
include
can
this.
you can recall this error too from one of my Python videos in which you can only concatenate stir to stir. So in this case, what Pranav is doing is that he has stir, which basically means string. And what this is called is basically casting values in which you convert from one data type to another. So in this case, we're converting C, which is originally an integer variable, to a string. So we have stir to represent string, and we have the C, which is the variable in parentheses, which means that Python, can you convert this from a integer to a string? And now if you run it, now it's gonna give us, now it's gonna work, saying you have $6. So now we were able to successfully print out the number of heads. And now if we rerun this, it's gonna give us a random number since we were randomly outputting 10 random coins.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and do this on my screen because you can see my screen here. Let me just go ahead and hit run, and notice that it says $6, and this is based on a random, or this is based on the coin flip that we have and the number of heads that we got from the coin flip. If we keep on doing this, we should get, or we don't have to, but we could get different numbers each time. So if you were just to set up a little game with your friends or something like that, you could set up a game in where they flip a coin and your budget is $10. So at max, they can get $10 from you in this game. And if they're super unlucky, they will get $0, which could happen. It's not happened yet based on my run, but it could happen. It could well happen. But most likely it's going to be close to 5, as you can see. So the more runs you do, you'll see the closer it'll get to 5 because of probability. But notice that it's roughly getting you to random values, which doesn't matter. That shows that our program works, and every good programmer tests their code a lot of times, not just once or twice, but a lot of times, to make sure that there are no errors and that you're not getting results because of something happening or led due to luck or something like that. You're actually getting these results because your program works and is completely efficient.
So when you look at this program, you can really start to see the powers of this random library. because we can simply generate a random number from this library. So you can look at this and see how powerful Python is with a lot of libraries that you can access. And with this library, you have a lot of access to methods, which make it easier for what you want to make in your program. In this case, generating random numbers. So that's what how libraries make it easier for us or the user to make these types of programs in Python.
Okay, and one last addition I wanted to make is one more string that I'll just add here just for fun and like an exclamation mark just for enthusiasm. And one thing I wanted to point and common errors with this is if you it's very tempting to add a space here. But if you add a space here, notice that it's not going to format well. There's going to be a space between the five and the exclamation mark. So you need to make sure that it's basically glued together. It's literally glued together. So if you add a space, it's gonna add a space after the glue. So these plus signs act as glue. There's two kinds of plus signs we can use. One plus sign is glue. The other plus sign is actually adding stuff. So those are the two that we're gonna focus on. And in this video, in these videos, and in the Python videos, and in the videos here. So that's essentially the program, and notice that it works now, and it's pretty flawless.
And also, if you recall from my Python videos, whatever is in this quotation marks is what's going to be printed out to its terminal. So if I add the space, when you print it out, it's also going to account for that space. And that's why it's giving us an additional space. So we need to make sure that in order to make sure that they're all glued together, we need to make sure that we have no spaces at all, meaning that you're keeping this all together and making sure that there's no space that we, additional space that we given in those quotation marks.
Yes. Okay. So that's basically this project, coin flip counter. This project was a very basic project, but it went through a lot of things. As you can see, it went through the random library. It went through creating variables, initializing variables, using a certain method from the random library, using the while loops, using the if conditions, incrementing these variables and adding a certain number to them, and then printing statements, concatenations, converting from from strings or from integers to strings, and so there's a lot of things that you can learn from just a basic project like this. So I'd encourage you always to try to make projects like this on your own. It's very easy to make a project like this and try to build it on your own. And when you're just introductory, try to make these basic projects, and when you go to advanced levels, try to challenge yourself with more and more interesting projects, and that's the best way to learn and get better at this amazing skill of programming. I hope you found this video helpful.
Goodbye.